This is the product adoption life cycle. For people who are just listening, I'll describe it. It's a bell curve. And what we see is that at the beginning, the only people who buy what you sell are buying it because it's new. And over time, it spreads through the curve to people who buy it because it's popular. And then finally, people who buy it because everyone else has it. So if I think about, remember that AI pin that UMaine came out with 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
They sold 100,000 the first day. I bought one because I buy things that are new. I don't buy them because they work. I don't buy them because they're proven. I buy them because they're new. When it comes to tech, when it comes to sneakers, I'm never buying anything new. I have 6 pairs of the same thing in my closet. So different people want different things. And so if we go and think about this curve, when you come out with a new thing, you say, hey, it's new. We have whole wheat hot cross buns, gluten-free or whatever it is. I don't know. The only people who buy it the first day are people who want it because it's new. And a lot of food entrepreneurs get in trouble because they think that if they just succeed when it's new, it's automatic that it's going to keep spreading because it's delicious.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look at the curve, here's an example of the curve with trucks. The Scout is an electric truck that went on sale in the US 3 months ago. They sold 50,000 of them the first day with a $500 deposit. People who put down the $500 deposit won the new truck. Then there's the worst truck ever made, the Cybertruck. We'll talk about that in a second. Then there's the Ford F-150 pickup truck, the most popular vehicle of all vehicles in the United States. And then there's a 1942 Dodge. Okay. It turns out the curve doesn't really look like this. The curve has a hole in it, a chasm, a hole between things that are popular because they're new and things that are popular because they work. And so when we think about the Cybertruck, the reason the Cybertruck is a failure is because after the people who bought it because it was new, got it, they stopped telling their friends about it because it's junk. So what scaffolding is how do you support the new people long enough and deep enough that they stick it out when it's hard to tell their friends? That scaffolding is the hard work the brand does to get from the early adopters who are looking for something fresh and new to the masses who don't care as much as those people. Mm-hmm. And over time, you probably are giving up some of, quote, your soul, right? That if you want your rock group to have a top 40 hit, you can't keep making edgy, speed metal, reggae music that only a few people want to hear. That once you give the fans who are like the new thing something, then you start broadening it because you've got to have something that works for the masses. So some food brands should consistently ignore the masses. They should say, it's not for you, right? That a magnificent vineyard should not come out with a low-priced wine for the masses. That will hurt them. They should say, no, this is just for people who understand the difference between a 1969 and a 1970. We're way over here. And it's surprising, but true, how many food brands have figured out that you don't need a huge audience to make something great and a brand that stands for something. Mm-hmm. And that's the opportunity. None of my books have crossed the chasm. Not one. I have 21 bestsellers, and yet I've never reached more than 1% of any population. On the other hand, Harry Potter crossed the chasm. Harry Potter crossed the chasm because there weren't that many, 10,000 nerdy kids fell in love with Harry Potter. But she was lucky enough that local bookstores found that it was an easy book to sell to kids who didn't know about it. That was the scaffolding. If you could get booksellers to feel like their life would get better if they promoted it, they would promote it. And that got it across the chasm to be the book everyone was reading, not the book some nerds were reading. So what did Tony do? So my friend Sean Eskenazi has a chocolate company, one of the first bean-to-bar companies in the US, very opposed to slave labor, doing really important work. Tony sells way more chocolate than Sean does. Tony backs into the chocolate business, doesn't want to be in the chocolate business, and he now sells 25% of all the chocolate in the Netherlands. How? Because he kept making big, cheap bars. He kept making assortment bars. He didn't get precious about it. He got distribution in every store he could find. He kept it cartoonish. He basically said, this isn't a super luxury brand and you don't have to feel stupid to buy it. He just said, this is the kind of chocolate people like us buy. It's cheap. You can give it out for Halloween and it's delicious. Notice that nowhere in most of the Tony Chocolonely promotion does he go on and on about slave labor, because that's not why he wants you to buy the chocolate. He wants you to buy the chocolate because your status in the circle you're in the Netherlands will go up if you show up with this instead of some lousy Nestle's bar. Plus, it's local.
That's the story changing then. So the early adopters, it was the slavery piece. As it gets bigger, it is ultimately thick, delicious chocolate.
Yep. And the fact that it's thick is a key piece of this, because someone who doesn't care can tell as soon as they touch it, this is not a Nestle bar. It's twice as thick. It's luxurious. It's probably delicious. That's a story, and he stuck with it, and he stuck with it. And now in the US, in just in the last 2 years, his shelf space keeps growing. You can buy a big bag of Tony Chocolonely pieces for like $5, which is great.
And so one thing, just to latch onto that Tony's example, which I kind of understood but didn't definitely understood, is the catch-22 of leverage systems. So it's systems, games, and feedback loops dancing together. Right. How could we use Tony's to explore that, like as an example, or as another example?
Okay, so the retailer in the Netherlands has a problem, which is their chocolate shelf doesn't sell as much per square foot as they would like. If you go to a merchant and say, I can increase your inventory turns and your profit per square foot, the merchant will always listen to you, right? And Tony didn't have the leverage to do that at the A&P or a big supermarket chain in the US, but in the Netherlands he did, because he could show up and say, I got all this media attention, I'm local, and I'm willing to sell at a really small margin so that you can make money. And because I'm going to add energy to your shelf, your sales per square foot are going to go up. That becomes a feedback loop, because when he gets a little bit of shelf space, if he makes them a little bit more money, they give him more shelf space, and then he makes them more money. And now the energy on the shelf is going up, and the other chocolate seems boring in comparison, and he's the normal kind. So now the sales go up again because he's the normal kind. And so he worked the loop again and again and again by making the merchant happy and by giving the customer something that they wanted. The more he does it, the better it works. And so what you're seeking to do as a food entrepreneur is, first you got to figure out which system are you playing in. Are you direct to consumer, or are you playing with merchants? Right? So, what's the strategy of By the Way Bakery? We've talked about it before, my wife's bakery. Everything she sells is gluten-free, dairy-free, and kosher. So by doing that, she already puts herself in a new category. She doesn't have any competition. She just has to get people into her category. And so the pitch is, don't just buy one or two for the kid with celiac at the party. Buy it for everybody, because no one will be able to tell it's not delicious. That's why it's called By the Way. By the way, it's gluten-free. So now you don't have to isolate a kid. There's always room at the table for everybody, because we've got stuff for everybody here, because we've focused on the people who can't eat the other stuff. And now your status goes up as a mom or a dad, because you're the parent who brings something out that all the kids can be delighted with. And that gets you to go back to the store, and then you can get hooked on the cycle. That approach to the market is harder at retail, because Whole Foods says, we don't care about one family. We have this piece of shelf space. We need sales per square foot to go up. You're not going to get shelf space unless you give us a story that we can use to start the cycle going again. So her wholesale division has a different challenge. How do you create that iterative feedback loop so that people who buy it come back and buy it some more, so you get more shelf space so it can be repeated? And in the US, traditionally, the way a big company does that is you buy a ton of ads. Because if you buy a ton of ads, people go to the store and ask for it, so you get more shelf space, and it pays for the ads.
Espressos is sponsored by supply chain software gurus Unleashed. It talks to your e-com and accounting software. It's helped islands cut admin time in half, get granular clarity on your margins, know where your stock is, don't miss availability. Brands like Candy Kittens, Tiny Rebel, and Trip all use Unleashed, and so should you.